What if I told you that Wendy Williams, the woman who built an empire by exposing everyone else's secrets, may now be trapped in one of the most shocking court battles of our time? Once the boldest voice on daytime TV, she's now fighting behind closed doors with doctors, judges, and even her own family pulled into a messy legal storm. The headlines say guardianship. The court papers say protection. But critics? They're calling it something else entirely, a cage. A system designed to strip her of her freedom, her finances, and maybe even her identity. And just when people thought things couldn't get any more intense, her ex-husband stepped in with a lawsuit so massive, it turned the whole situation upside down. We're talking about $250 million, claims of secret over medication, and accusations that Wendy has been cut off from the outside world. But here's the part that has fans asking questions. When Wendy herself finally spoke, she denied the medical story that's been told about her. So who's telling the truth? Is Wendy being protected, or is she being silenced? Because behind the headlines, the documentaries, and the legal filings, there's one chilling question left unanswered. Is this really about Wendy's health, or is it about control? And as the court battles heat up, the shocking details reveal just how far this guardianship drama has gone. The drama really exploded back in 2022, when Wendy's world turned upside down almost overnight. It started with her bank, Wells Fargo, suddenly freezing her accounts. They claimed they were worried about unusual activity and suggested Wendy wasn't capable of managing her money. That one move triggered a chain reaction that led straight into the courtroom. By May of that year, a judge stepped in and placed Wendy under a court-appointed guardianship. On paper, this meant someone else would control her finances and major life decisions. But for a woman who made a career out of being outspoken and independent, it felt like everything she built was slipping out of her hands. The guardianship wasn't just a financial issue, it quickly became a public spectacle. Rumors swirled about her health, her mental state, and even whether she was being isolated from her family. Some insiders painted the guardianship as a safety net, a way to protect Wendy from people who might take advantage of her. But others whispered about backroom deals, shady motives, and a system that seemed more interested in power than protection. This legal drama wasn't just a single hearing, it became an ongoing saga, filled with sealed documents, closed-door decisions, and a growing sense that Wendy herself was being pushed further and further out of her own story. And while most people thought the guardianship would quietly settle the issue, it was only the beginning. Because the fight over Wendy's freedom was about to get even bigger and even messier. Behind the headlines and the legal filings was something even more personal: Wendy's health. Court documents eventually revealed that doctors had diagnosed her with frontotemporal dementia and aphasia, conditions that affect memory, behavior, and speech. For fans who had watched her command a stage with sharp wit and fearless commentary, the news was heartbreaking. The court leaned heavily on those medical evaluations, extending her guardianship all the way into late 2025. On paper, the diagnosis explained everything: why she stumbled through some shows, why she disappeared from the spotlight, and why the courts felt she couldn't manage her own life. But here's where the story takes a twist. Wendy herself has pushed back against that narrative. She's openly said she doesn't agree with the way her medical information was publicized, and she's denied that her condition is as severe as the headlines make it sound. To her, the story being told about her health feels exaggerated and maybe even weaponized. That contradiction, the official diagnosis versus Wendy's own voice, has left fans and critics divided. Some argue she's in denial, clinging to the independence she once had. Others believe the system is using her health as an excuse to keep control of her money and her freedom. And just when people thought the health battle explained the guardianship, the situation got even murkier. Because Wendy herself described her living conditions not as care, but as something far darker. For most people, a guardianship sounds like protection. A way to keep someone safe when they can't fully care for themselves. But the way Wendy describes it? It doesn't sound protective at all. She's compared her situation to living in a prison. Limited phone access. Restricted visits. Decisions made for her without her consent. At one point, Even her closest family members said they struggled just to get in touch with her. For someone who built a career on being outspoken, it was like her voice had been taken away. Supporters of the guardianship argue these rules are necessary. They say the restrictions keep away opportunists who might take advantage of Wendy in her vulnerable state. But critics, and there are plenty, see it differently. To them, the rules look more like control tactics. A way to isolate her, weaken her independence, and make sure the people in charge of her life stay in charge. And while the court calls it care, fans watching from the outside can't shake the feeling that this looks a lot like captivity. A woman who once had the freedom to question everyone else's truth is now fighting to defend her own. But if you thought the restrictions were shocking, what came next would blow the story wide open. Because Wendy's ex-husband was about to re-enter the picture, with a lawsuit so massive, it threatened to turn the entire guardianship upside down. Just when it seemed like Wendy's guardianship couldn't get any more complicated, her ex-husband, Kevin Hunter, came crashing back into the story. And he didn't come quietly. He filed a federal lawsuit demanding a jaw-dropping $250 million. In that lawsuit, Hunter claimed Wendy was being overmedicated, financially exploited, and cut off from the outside world. He painted a picture of a woman stripped of her freedom, living under conditions that looked more like punishment than protection. To hear him tell it, the guardianship wasn't about saving Wendy, it was about controlling her. The dollar amount alone made headlines. $250 million isn't just a legal filing, it's a statement. Hunter accused the people managing Wendy's life of turning her into a prisoner while draining the fortune she spent decades building. For fans, it was explosive. Suddenly, this wasn't just about medical diagnoses or court orders. It was about power, money, and whether Wendy was the victim of a system designed to keep her down. But here's where the story twists again. While Hunter claimed he was fighting for Wendy's freedom, her own legal team said otherwise. In fact, they accused him of violating court orders by filing the lawsuit at all. And that clash between Wendy's ex-husband and her court-appointed guardians set the stage for one of the messiest showdowns yet. The lawsuit lit a fire, but almost immediately, Wendy's own legal team pushed back, and hard. Her court-appointed lawyers filed motions saying Kevin Hunter had no right to speak on her behalf. They argued Wendy herself never authorized his lawsuit, and they even accused him of breaking court orders just by filing it. This left fans with a tough question: who's actually speaking for Wendy? On one side, her ex-husband claims he's the only one willing to stand up and expose the system. On the other, the guardians and lawyers insist they're the ones protecting her best interests. But in the middle of all this legal back and forth is Wendy herself. And that's what makes the situation so unsettling. With every side claiming to fight for her, her actual voice seems to be missing. It's almost like Wendy, the woman who made a career out of never holding back, has been pushed into silence while everyone else decides her future. The confusion only fueled speculation. Was Hunter genuinely trying to free her? Or was this about revenge and money? Were the guardians truly protecting Wendy? Or were they part of a bigger scheme to keep her under control? What was clear is that this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. It had turned into a public battle over power, money, and the right to speak for a woman who used to speak for herself louder than anyone else on television. And just when the courtroom drama seemed impossible to untangle, the spotlight shifted again, this time to the public, with a documentary and a movement that made Wendy's fight bigger than ever. If the court filings and lawsuits weren't enough, the story burst into the public eye again with a documentary that made headlines everywhere. Trapped: What is Happening to Wendy Williams? Premiered in May 2025, and it pulled back the curtain on her life under guardianship. The film didn't just cover legal documents, it showed the raw, emotional side of Wendy's struggle. Viewers saw her isolation, her confusion, and the heartbreaking reality of what it looks like when someone's freedom is placed in someone else's hands. It was powerful, uncomfortable, and impossible to ignore. Almost overnight, the hashtag Free Wendy movement exploded online. Fans, celebrities, and even critics began demanding answers. Was Wendy being protected, or was she being silenced? Posts flooded social media, arguing that her guardianship was less about care and more about control. The movement echoed another high-profile battle, Britney Spears' conservatorship fight, but with its own shocking twists. People started asking, how many more celebrities, or even ordinary people, are trapped in the same system with no way out? The documentary didn't solve Wendy's problems, but it made one thing clear. The world was paying attention. And with millions of eyes watching, every court date, every public appearance, and every new headline carried even more weight. But the biggest question remained, was Wendy finally getting closer to freedom, or was this public pressure only making her fight harder? And then, just when everyone thought she'd vanished from the spotlight completely, a surprising moment gave fans hope. After months of court hearings, rumors, and sealed documents, fans finally got a glimpse of Wendy out in the real world. She was spotted in New York City, out to dinner with friends. Smiling, laughing, looking like the Wendy everyone remembered. For a moment, it felt like the storm had lifted and maybe, just maybe, she was on her way back. But that's where the story takes another twist. Because during that outing, Wendy reportedly denied the very diagnosis that's kept her under guardianship, frontotemporal dementia. She insisted the reports about her condition had been blown out of proportion, and she wasn't nearly as incapacitated as the court suggested. That denial split people down the middle. Some fans took it as proof that Wendy was still sharp, still aware, and still strong enough to take control of her life. Others worried it showed exactly why the guardianship remained in place, because denial itself could be part of the illness. The dinner sighting became more than just a tabloid headline. It was a symbol. Was this Wendy reclaiming her independence, or was it just a carefully controlled appearance to quiet the public backlash? Either way, the moment raised bigger questions. If Wendy is well enough to dine out in public, to laugh, to hold her own conversations, why is she still under such tight control? And if she isn't, why does it feel like the truth about her condition is being kept under lock and key? The answers aren't clear. But what is clear is that every move Wendy makes, every word she speaks, is now being dissected as a clue in a much bigger mystery. And that brings us to the real question at the center of it all. What does freedom actually mean for Wendy Williams? Wendy Williams' story is more than just a celebrity headline. It's a battle over control, freedom, and the right to make your own choices. Whether you see her as a woman in need of protection or a star trapped in an unfair system, one thing is certain, this fight isn't over. So what do you think? Is Wendy being protected, or is she being silenced? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear where you stand. And if you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive.